Part 3 Conclusion Circle of Wounds The Underdeveloped Brain. Monday's mindful moments are an invitation to contemplate the human journey of life with me. My wish is that these writings ignite a spark of thoughtful intention as you welcome this new week. With all my love and gratitude, Chelsea. I think back to this memory now. The car incident, it's been almost 30 years. I think of cancel culture and what a behavior like this would mean today. I don't dare run through the what-ifs. Instead, I move towards the impulsivity of an underdeveloped brain. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that assists with the pros and cons of decision making. I think about how this part of the brain does not fully reach maturity until the age of 25 years old. I think of young, dumb kids navigating this world with the underdeveloped part of the brain that helps with things like planning, prioritizing, and making intelligent choices. I think about parents and how we spend our lives trying to protect our children, running the tape through, accessing this part of the brain repeatedly. I appreciate how beautiful it is to witness a child's developmental growth. I send my gratitude to every adult who helps to strengthen this part of the brain through their patience, mentoring, and connection. I think of the less lucky kids, the ones who don't have supportive adults assisting them with running the tape through, and how painful it is to see the lifelong consequences that are rooted in lack of awareness, impulsivity, and the double risk of untreated developmental wounds and trauma that compound these already vulnerable developing brains. It reminds me of my time working with severely emotionally gained kids in a lockdown facility where the culture and dynamics of the environment reinforced what was okay and what was not okay. I remember my job as a therapeutic behavioral specialist in my 20s. Fresh out of college, thin, cute, with platinum blonde hair and straight Betty Page bangs. Young and often wearing creeper shoes, a studded belt, black pants, and a nice shirt that was tucked in. 5'8" and all of 123 pounds. Cute and professional enough given my job in a lockdown facility, working directly with severely emotionally disturbed, abused gang kids who were recently let out of juvenile hall. This facility was split. Half of the ward had girls and the other half had boys. In the middle, between all the locked doors, was a cafeteria where the boys and girls ate at different times. Each ward had a few padded rooms designated for the kids who had been restrained for being dangerous to themselves or others, and each had a hall with a designated classroom. Outside was a basketball court contained by a chain-link fence and topped with barbed wire. This was the court where I would learn to play sports, often getting pelted in the face with a ball. It hurt, but I didn't care. Sports were the shortcut to connection, and being tough was necessary if I had any chance at all of making any difference in my new role. I recall the first day at my job. I introduced myself to a kid who I could hardly describe as a kid, since he was over 6 feet tall and looked more like a man. "Hello, I'm Chelsea. I'll be helping you." He replied instantly with a smile and these words, "Great! You can start by helping me by getting on your knees and sucking my dick." The group of boys that surrounded him burst out laughing. And though I was terrified on the inside, I too was quick-witted. "Well," I said, "that isn't the type of help they pay me for, but it is a pleasure to meet you." My brain was flooded with fear that I'd be attacked or raped, but the fear was far outweighed with determination, and that is what kept me showing up day after day. I had no idea of how to be a therapeutic behavioral specialist, but I knew what it was like to be a pissed-off kid. I witnessed the raw behaviors of these teens directly that I worked with day after day. One kid I worked with would smear his own feces on the classroom door to avoid going to school. A girl I worked with would piss off other kids with her obnoxious, offhanded comments and was once stabbed with a pencil by another kid. I was sitting next to her trying to get her to knock off the talking shit part when that happened. Needless to say, the pencil stab put an end to that. I can recall fights randomly breaking out and kids being carried off by staff into padded rooms where they would yell and scream and throw themselves at the walls. I remember the cafeteria where the choice was some sort of awful hot entree or 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. One boy I worked with ate 6 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, 2 for each meal. He was too paranoid to eat any of the other food, and I can't say that I could blame him. I recall the countless files I read specific to each kid I was assigned to. The worst kids were the ones who came to somebody like me, who got to have me as the one-on-one person to help them. These were the kids that risked going back to juvenile hall if they failed placement here. I eventually stopped reading these files. They were all the same sort of abuse with unique nuances. History of neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, witness to violence. Some were born addicted to substances. Others had been sold for sex by their own parents. Awful human behavior inflicted by those who brought them into the world and were supposed to love and protect them. Innocent beings who would be robbed from innocence immediately upon their entrance into this world. Kids who didn't deserve abuse, neglect, mentally ill parents, yet they were born to survive and they would learn to protect themselves in the only way that they knew how. I reflect on those kids, their underdeveloped, traumatized brains, and I think about the risk of my own safety that was jeopardized 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day. I remember the feeling of being in danger in that lockdown facility, but I also remember understanding the natural consequences that occurred, rooted in the animalistic part of the brain. I understood it, and I could identify with some of the reactions I would see. Though I hadn't suffered the way that they had, I understood basic feelings, reactivity, and grew to understand the culture of their environment. I worked at that job for almost a year. During this time, I had 8 kids who I was successful with. That meant 8 kids who didn't fail placement and didn't have to go back to juvenile hall. The social workers and staff would often call me in and ask me what my magic was. And for that, I did not have an answer. Other than these kids learned to trust me, and then they developed loyalty to me. When that happened, they would follow the advice that I gave them, rooted in 2 simple things: behavior and consequences. For every behavior, there's either a positive or a negative consequence. It's as simple as that. I became the supportive adult, even though I was only a few years older, helping them form their prefrontal cortex by running the tape through over and over again. I held firm to rewards and consequences. I advocated when their voice was not heard. I taught them how to communicate in a way that they would be heard. I collaborated with any individual on their team who would listen, and more than anything, I loved each kid I worked with. They mattered to me. I learned about their own context of being loyal, the gang kids I worked with, and the things they would do to defend their neighborhoods and their turf. Behaviors that they would go to any length to control or deter another's behavior. I think about the disaster of untreated trauma that comes from being a human in this world, and the disaster of the hurt we inflict on others. I'm still looking for a happy takeaway for this essay. I only have an opportunity to pause and utilize my own fully developed brain to conclude that being able to pause and run the tape through is now my most valuable gift. This is the gift I practice constantly. However, it's counterintuitive to the 17-year-old girl who still resides inside me. I can still fantasize about revenge. My brain gets satisfaction from all the behaviors I can do to shut down another's unwanted behavior and mitigate the impact of emotional harm. Because a fantasy is just that, something we imagine. I know better now than to believe every thought that I have. I educate others that we have an average of 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and if we believed all of these thoughts, we would all be locked up or just simply insane. I teach behavioral choice and how to respond rather than to react to every individual that I work with. I drill it into my children's brain that behavior is a choice, and this is a challenge when another human hurts them. I have learned how to actively calm the fire inside my brain and body that comes when I witness their human journey that includes pain from other kids, school, and the walking, wounded adults that don't think about the impact of what they do or say. I damper this fire by running that fucking tape through. It's a process that's hard and it takes time. There is no instant gratification, but I know the risk of a fire being started in a dry environment, vulnerable to taking over and spreading. I do my personal best to put that fire out in a way that aligns with the highest, most wisest part of myself. God, and I have so many heart-to-heart talks. I meditate and imagine wishing this person well. I vent to my closest girlfriends, practice compassion because I know that we're all flawed human beings. When I get stuck, I hire a helper. Sometimes when I crack and I lose it with my words. Though I elect not to say all the words I'm thinking, I focus on being direct, articulate, and firm. The intensity of this crack is often my last-ditch effort to put an end to chaos, but I will go there if necessary. This confrontational behavior backfires internally with a mix of relief, satisfaction, anxiety, and inner incongruence because I'm both grateful for this part of myself and I also loathe this part of me. I will conclude this essay with my last food for thought. We are not responsible for others' behavior. We only have one thing we can control, and that, my friend, is how we respond.